Good evening, everyone, and thank you for those who have signed up already. We're just going to give it another minute to see if there's anybody else who will be coming on. All right, well, I think that we are ready to start tonight. So welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending. Tonight, we're having a conversation about responsible investing. It's definitely a topic of discussion and one that's really important. It's something that we've been talking about in the department for a number of years now, but the most common things that keep recurring is that people are wondering, what is responsible investing? Or they simply were not aware of their choices here, that it was indeed a choice. So tonight, we're going to cover those two big questions. So I am Scott Kovacs, and I'm a certified financial planner with the Wealth Management Division of the Credit Union here. There are some other team members also working with us. And from the left is Barbara Cooper, Katrina Lowry, and Janet Jones. She's our branch compliance manager. And Randall Smisko, who's also an investment advisor, but takes care of also in the insurance needs for our members. First Credit Union has expanded over the years, so we actually have an office as well in Courtenay and Comox, and that's where Tracy Holbrook rounds out the team. She is an investment advisor and account manager over there. So responsible investing, what is responsible investing? Responsible investing in the past used to be called socially responsible investing, SRI. Sometimes we see the acronym perhaps ESG, and all these things are rolled into the conversation about responsible investing. So really, what is it? Responsible investing is about more. When we look at investing, we're all interested in getting a reasonable rate of return for the risk that we take. But is that enough? So some people question about what types of companies our money is going to support. So that's where responsible investing comes in to address other additional issues besides merely an investment selection choice to go, what is this company doing to the environment? What type of impact are they having? Socially, what type of impact are they having to community members where that factory might be or where the operations of the company are? Or governance issues. A company might be profitable, they might be making money, but how are they treating the employees? So some hot topics out there for discussion might be executive pay disclosure. It might be the fact that board of directors are male dominated and there are no female members on the board. It might be the fact that there are discrepancies between advancement between males and females in a company. So asking some questions like this is where responsible investing steps in and says, is there more that we should be doing with our money or could be doing with our money if we find that's important? So responsible investing is the more component when we invest. Responsible investing has definitely grown over the years. Latest stats, more than half of investment choices that are being made with some type of screening process or thought about ESG. That is something new that has not happened in the past. I've been an investment advisor at the credit union here for 21 years now. And throughout that length of time, there's always been some interest in our clients and our members wanting to invest in the socially responsible world. In the old days, that used to be with a fund company called Ethical Funds here. But there are other options here to look at, well, much more so than there were years ago. This is an interesting chart saying that as of a couple of years ago, there was over $3 billion of money that was exclusively responsible in nature here. 10 years ago, that number was a mere fraction of that. With my 21 years here of being an investment advisor, I've seen nothing but growth in interest as people become aware that they do have an option when they invest. that their money does have a voice when they invest here. And that's something that we have we have a VP from NEI Investments, Rod Castellanos, who is going to explain a lot more about what those choices are. So, Rod?
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. That's a great introduction. And I think it helps set the stage for what we're going to talk about here. So I want to continue because I'm going to take over and I'm going to share that. Scott, you can see that?
Yep, definitely. All looks good.
Fantastic. Thanks again, everybody, for taking time out of your busy lives to get to know a little bit more about this topic. It's an intimate, I think, event here. So always open to questions. Otherwise, if you want to type something into the chat box and I can get to it, whatever you're more comfortable with. As Scott said, I'm with a company called NEI Investments. We are Canada's leading provider of responsible investments. And not only market leaders with market share, but thought leaders in this space with more than 30 years experience. And absolutely, some of the points that Scott had touched on in regards to the growth that we see in this space, tremendous, just tremendous over the last, especially over the last 5 years, I would say we've seen a tremendous amount of growth as there's kind of different areas that this area is branching off into. And I'm going to cover that. But there's a number of ways we can look at that. I can move my, there we go. So I'm going to skip some of these kind of the definitions, but maybe to give you kind of an overall framework of why this is important. When we take a look at what is traditional financial analysis, and that's simply how we look at a company. We look at their balance sheet. We want to make sure it's a good investment. We work hard for our money. We want to make sure we're going to put it into an investment that's going to make us money, help save for retirement down the line. But there's other factors to consider when we do take a look at that. And that is related to those ESG components, how that company impacts the environment, how it works within communities, how it's structured, how it's being run, employment practices, pay practices, all of those ideas in order to get a more informed decision. And that's really what it is. It's a broader way of looking at a company. We want to know how the company operates and how it produces those financial returns. We also want to know how it behaves, because that behavior can have oftentimes negative impacts on society. But now we're starting to branch off and looking at companies in terms of how they can have positive impacts on society. Historically, absolutely, it's grown. The roots of responsible investing, nothing new. But going back to the early 1900s, where it was more around avoidance, faith-based investing, as they call it, revolving around avoidance of certain companies, maybe related to alcohol or gambling. We kind of move forward into the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where there was a greater maybe environmental focus there, concerns around how, when we talked about acid rain or pollution, dumping, those types of ideas. Obviously, certain events along the way listed there, Chernobyl and Exxon Valdez, that were catalysts to further change of how we look at companies, to where we see this evolution happening now and very much coming on strong these days, spurred by certain, I would say, policies related to renewable energies, but kind of a broader base as a whole. But we talk about, whether it's how companies do business from a clean perspective, and there's a number of ways that that's being addressed. Again, kind of noting the growth in this space, where we see $30 trillion globally, tremendous growth in the last couple of years around this. But it's really become a standard measure of how a company is added to a portfolio by many asset managers. I'll talk a little bit about that later in the presentation, but we've seen a tremendous amount of growth coming from, say, pension funds, institutional clients who really what they want to do is make sure they have a better understanding of how these companies behave, because they're trying to avoid pitfalls. They're trying to avoid risks. And so using that ESG framework helps them, get a better sense of that. So I'm going to go through kind of some points. We've got 7 questions here, or 7 points why we feel that why you should be investing responsibly, and how does it apply to you today. By taking a look at how it is relevant. Here's a number of headline issues. These are not exclusive or inclusive to any particular topic, but going through them, we've seen these come up in the news on a regular basis, and behind them are companies that are involved in either contributing to it or how companies can change in order to help avoid it. So we take a look at things like diversity. We talked about gender pay equity, diversity hiring programs, those types of ideas, digital privacy and manipulation. We came through the U.S. election in November. There was a lot of discussion around that at that time in regards to what information is being pushed out, what was being censored. Something that is ongoing. It has not left us. It might have been shadowed by more recent events around COVID or other events in the U.S., but is the fentanyl crisis. And behind that, where do drugs come from, manufacturers, how they're being distributed. We're looking, as investors, we do invest in pharmaceutical companies, and we want to make sure that there's accountability behind those pharmaceutical companies in terms of how they actually distribute those drugs. Corruption and climate change, something again that is pointed to as the next major crisis that we're getting more information about, of how that is actually having an impact not only on a society, but around how companies are being impacted, and some of the threats that we see there, both on an environmental level and on a financial level. So again, these topics are quite broad, but very much relevant in terms of our daily lives. The second point here, looking at how responsible investing can align with values, individuals' values, and everybody has different values in terms of what they deem as being important or not. There are kind of common exclusions, though, as we take a look at many responsible investing companies, that being related to things like tobacco manufacturing or weapon manufacturing, nuclear power manufacturing. Those oftentimes are looked at as negative impacts on society. The production of those goods, those services, there are consequences to them. And unfortunately, no matter how much engagement or discussion you have with those companies around trying to curb or change their behavior, we're not going to see healthier cigarettes, and the proliferation of guns means more guns typically out there. So there's some limitations or exclusions that are often found when we talk about responsible investing. There's also rules-based company exclusions, and that's going to be companies that maybe come with a certain history. Monsanto is a name that's often brought up as a company that that people want to exclude from their portfolios because of maybe some of the behavior that they've had over the years, questionable behavior. So there's going to be a number of companies that are simply excluded from portfolios because of historical behavior. Number 3, we're looking at responsible investing and how it can deliver peace of mind. And this is really due to, again, by looking at a company's ESG, ideally what we're able to do is avoid certain pitfalls. The 2 examples that we have on the screen here, British Petroleum and SNC-Lavalin, both of which were excluded from our portfolios due to certain reasons. British Petroleum, actually, our analysts had started throwing up red flags very early prior to the Deepwater Horizon incident in 2010 around safety. And so we had made recommendations to avoid that. And that was simply by looking at that company's, again, its safety record, and whether it was a company we wanted to own. SNC-Lavalin, their participation in the construction of nuclear power facilities, something again we wanted to avoid, but again, as we saw further down the line, caught up in a corporate governance scandal, a corruption scandal, really, a couple of years ago, and obviously both incidents there having a negative impact on an individual's financial portfolio. Responsible investing can uncover new opportunities. As I'd mentioned, there are things we're looking at now. We do talk about some of the challenges that we have in this world. There's more people on this planet, the need for water, food, energy, all very much a concern going forward. But as we look at companies that are creating maybe innovation in those spaces that are going to be able to deliver that growing demand, that presents an opportunity for us to take advantage and see again how they're continuing to meet those needs, and we can participate in that growth as well. Number 5, responsible investing can provide measurable results beyond investment growth. And this is an area of responsible investing called impact investing. It's something that is emerging. It's, last couple of years, we've seen a tremendous amount of growth there. But again, providing results beyond just simple financial returns. And you'll see some numbers here. These come actually directly from one of our funds called our Environmental Leaders Fund, which has this focus on companies that are creating innovation and technology development for that growing need out there of population growth. And what we found actually through an audit was we had a $10 million investment, which the fund has a much larger assets under management than that. But with that $10 million, we had it had the equivalent action of treating or saving water, or as well as providing renewable energy, in addition to recovering or treating materials. So, 3 areas that we feel that we're creating some positive impact by investing in those companies and diverting maybe funds going into other companies that may not be focused on that. The reason number 6 here, responsible investing can empower you. And so to take a step back, responsible at NEI, we invest in companies, and the fact that we're investing in those companies gives us the ability to have conversations with individuals at those companies, whether it be board of directors, whether it be the executive suite, or whether it be shareholder relations individuals. It also we have the ability to attend annual general meetings and vote, present shareholder proxies, and so forth. These are all just actionable items because as shareholders in those companies, we have that ability. And so that dialogue that we have with individuals in those companies is called corporate engagement. We will sit down with the companies we invest in and address some of these ESG criteria that we feel are creating some or could create some negative impacts. And so I'm going to walk through a couple of stories here of how we've had maybe some success of creating positive change by actually investing in those companies and having the ability to make progress. We again, looking at companies, the universe that is out there to invest in, we're not looking for perfection, but we are looking for progress. And so the first example here is talking about companies that have compensation related to some of this ESG criteria. The specific examples with CN Rail. And so Back in the 2000s, there was a number of train derailments that CN had. And unfortunately, there's a number of issues there, depending on obviously the cargo you're carrying. If it's oil and you're dumping that into an environment, that's an environmental concern. If you're dumping product, of course, into certain other areas. But there's also a concern from clients of CN not getting their product to market. And so after a number of these derailments or accidents, we actually sat down with the management at CN, and they came back to us based on our recommendations and made several changes. One is they actually hired or created the role of Chief Safety Officer, something that was necessary there given the track record that they had. But the second, I think more importantly, was they actually tied the compensation from for the executives to that safety record. So now there is a vested interest, so to speak, by senior management to ensure that their product gets to market. I'll make one other note here. You'll see that the bottom part of this slide highlights the UN SDG. Those are the Social Development Goals. And what those refer to are 18 different objectives that the United Nations Principles of Responsible Investing have created as part of their framework, which helps everybody kind of, which helps asset managers globally identify how that framework, or if they're operating within those principles for responsible investing. So that's the only real recognized framework that we have right now, and that's continuing to strengthen. But the two examples that you see here are related to both responsible consumption and production, and then peace, justice, and strong institutions. The second example here, talking about board diversity. Dollarama, probably a company you see regularly on the streets. I know I see it around town. It is a company we had invested in, but recognizing the senior board at Dollarama was, again, male dominated. We recognize that there is value to having a more gender diverse board of directors. And in fact, research has shown that where you do have more diversity on your board of directors, you actually find that returns are higher for those companies. So through a number of corporate engagements with Dollarama, we found that they continue to add diversity to their board, resulting in at least 2 of the 5 individuals on that board being female. And again, the United Nations development goal here related to reducing inequalities. Opioid crisis. As mentioned, it's an ongoing crisis that we have. But looking back at the origins of it, where there was distribution of product, and again, kind of thinking back on that 60-minute special where they found these small towns in West Virginia, 500 people that are receiving 10 million pills. Obviously, there's very little accountability to where the distribution of those products are being tracked to. So we saw that, and we're not the only ones, but a good example of how we've actually collaborated with other organizations like ourselves in order to help make some change. So in this example, we joined the Investors for Opioid Accountability, which is 57 institutional investors with more than $4 trillion in assets under management to discuss this with pharmaceutical companies and looking for change. Some of the changes would include establishing board independence, enhanced oversight of that opioid business risk, restructuring executive compensation, and changing sales practices incentives. And the result here was that 12 of these companies issued or committed to issue board opioid risk reports. 10 adopted a policy combining a clawback compensation for executives who were committing this misconduct. And 3 of those companies agreed, again, to separate the chairman and CEO positions, creating, again, more accountability and transparency. We also had a shareholder proposal with Johnson & Johnson, which we filed last year. I don't have the results of that in front of me, but again, that would be something that we would find in one of our active ownership reports, which I'll share with you at the end of this as well. The social development goal here, looking at good health and well-being. The fourth example here, taking a look at supply chain risks. A lot of the products that we consume, the clothes that we wear, for example, not typically made locally, oftentimes made overseas, out of our jurisdictions. But again, talking to companies that would have been purchasers of products from overseas, of which many do, including Leon's, Aritzia, Canadian Tire, Metro, Loblaws, just pushing them for best practices on responsible sourcing to help reduce legal, financial, and reputational risks in their supply chains. And so the results here, again, many of these companies simply stepping up and saying, yeah, we're actually going to publish these supplier codes of conduct. So at least we know that it is it's being tracked. And again, NEI being a collective investor with the Retail Council of Canada, looking to increase industry awareness of these supply chain risks. Again, just looking to ensure that individuals who are working in factories overseas are working in fair, equitable working conditions in order to avoid any negative impact related to those companies. Number 7 here, responsible investing puts the smart money with the cool kids. Kind of tongue in cheek here, but there's 2 demographics that we've been looking at. Again, I'd mentioned that the pension side of the business is very much focused on ensuring that the companies they're investing in are holistically, they're good investments. So looking at both balance sheet as well as how they behave. And then the millennial generation, some different ideas about the types of companies they want to invest in. Starting first, though, with the pensions or the institutional money. The graph here shows the United Nations Principle of Responsible Investing, the signatories. So those asset managers globally who have actually signed on to that framework that I had mentioned, going back to 2006. And in fact, NEI was one of the first signatories to this framework. So again, kind of showing the legacy and the strength there. But you can see the growth in not only the number of signatories, but again, the assets that are under those managers. And a relatable item, I think that if people weren't aware of it, but the Canadian Pension Plan, the investment board, if you go to their website, they also have their own mission statement when it comes to responsible investing, where they say that we consider responsible investing simply as an intelligent long-term investing over the exceptionally long investment horizon over which we invest. ESG factors have the potential to be significant drivers or barriers to profitability and shareholder value. So again, really looking to incorporate that criteria, that ESG criteria, to ensure that the companies that they're investing in will be there in perpetuity and will continue to grow, ideally avoiding pitfalls that might fall outside of that ESG scope. The second, talking about millennials as that demographic. Again, and it's going to be the second largest um, age group, pardon me, the demographic behind the baby boomers. And so that's where we see, you know, different ideas in terms of the types of companies they want to invest in, how they want to invest, but very much in line where we're seeing not only companies kind of falling in line to utilizing some of this ESG, but finding opportunities about how we're looking at things like, say, impact investing as kind of a next growing area going forward. And so now the two most important reasons to invest responsibly. Responsible investing can give you better investment performance. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is how companies are actually assessed these days. If we were to look 30 years ago at how companies were actually valued, we would have found a large portion of it would have been based on tangible assets, land, factory, inventory, all of those kind of obviously tangible components to a balance sheet. Whereas we fast forward today, a lot of it's really based on things like brand value, reputation, patents, intellectual property. And if we think about the largest companies out there, very much reflects that. In fact, if we look at a company like Tesla, which is, you know, that everybody kind of likes to use that example. Again, if we take a look at Tesla's property values or their land values, you know, it doesn't. That's not the reason that they're worth as much as they are. It's all around intellectual property. It's around its brand value and reputation. So this is very much, obviously, it's been a growing trend, and we expect that to continue, given the nature of the companies that we see at the top of the S&P market. When we do talk about performance, though, we have found the trend gaining upward strength when we do talk about how it's actually performing. Morningstar has shown that where those funds categorized as either sustainable versus traditional, we're finding that there is outperformance of the sustainable or the ESG related funds over the traditional funds. 2020 was a great example of that. I think we found a lot of companies who stepped up, especially during COVID, whether it was how they treated their maybe their employees from, say, a pay perspective. Also, how we found that how companies actually stepped up from a, you know, protecting them from a PPE perspective. Pardon me, in protecting them. But yeah, those were the types of companies that had done better through 2020. So this is a trend that we expect only continue to gain strength going forward. The second reason here, looking at responsible investing can help create a better world for everyone. And the question, would you not agree that an investment approach that considers the impact on the environment and our communities and helps make companies better corporate citizens can help make the world better for everyone? I would assume there is a collective yes to that. And then one final thing to talk to your advisor about responsible investing is that responsible investing can make you happier. Who doesn't want to be happier? Studies have shown that investors who talk to advisors about making an impact beyond investment returns are either satisfied or very satisfied. So again, there is a feel-good note that comes with that. So with that, that is my presentation deck. I'll open it up if there are any questions that people wanted to ask. Or do we have any that came in today?
I would just like to tack on to your last slide there, Rod.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about, you know, 90% of people being more happier with their investment choice, right? Everybody's got a passion. Everybody's got an interest in something, right? They want to get behind that. I care about the environment. I feel bad that there's inequities out there that exist, and they don't know what to do about it, right? If you're investing your money, because we're making a choice, do we save our money? Do we invest our money? There are investments that we can buy, and they make us a reasonable return for the risk we take, all that type of stuff. But Are they speaking to the passion or the concerns that we have? Other investments are not speaking to those concerns. When you're dealing with a responsible investment, you have the option here as an investor to say, hey, this is important to me. Maybe I don't like these 10 things, but I'm concerned about this one thing. And ethical, social responsible investments, ESG process gives you a voice to say, I'm concerned about this, speak up for me. So that's the option here. When I talk with clients and I say that, hey, there is this option here that you're concerned about ABC, I know exactly what would help you that way here so that you can direct your investments that will back what you feel is important in life. Other things don't. You also brought up the fact that when it comes to ESG, NEI investments, they're very proactive in activism. And this is a key thing here is that we have to remember when we own an investment, we're an owner. We have a voice. The sad reality is if you own 100 shares in a company, nobody cares. You get to vote, but when there's millions of shares outstanding, it doesn't matter. But when you pool your 100 shares with somebody else's 500, somebody else's 1,000, all of a sudden you get a growing voice, and NEI investments will go to the shareholder meetings. They will vote your shares. This is not a normal occurrence when you have other investments. Other investments take a very passive approach and they rarely will vote your shares at any shareholder meeting because they don't have an agenda other than making money off of your investment. There is an agenda process behind NEI investments to say, hey, we think you could be doing something better and we want to promote that. As more and more people put money behind the movement here, the voice grows. You have 1,000 shares, again, nobody cares. You have 10,000, nobody cares. You have 1 million, you have 10 million, you have 20 million. All of a sudden, access is given to talk to a VP at a company to say, hey, well, listen, because we own 4% of the company. We own some larger stake here. And that is the power of this movement here as it grows. It's a voice that you didn't have before that somebody is speaking up for you. Rod has shared some of the performance data here. And products that are offering an ESG screen do tend to have less risk than the normal ones out there. But a key thing too in terms of performance, you're not paying anything extra for this activism. So somebody is speaking up for you. You can go to bed at night going, I did something that was important to me. I put my money there. I put my voice there that something could change or improve in the future because of the choice I made with my money today. So if you didn't know you had an option, you do have an option. You should be talking about this with your investment advisor and figuring, okay, how much do I want to put there? What could I put there? What's it doing? Do I agree with that? Right? So if you do have those types of concerns, this is the exact product, but it's exciting because nobody else, no other investment out there is speaking according to what you think is important. NEI investments gives you the option to say, this is important to me, do something. And they are, and it's exciting.
Yeah, Scott, you're absolutely right. There are a couple of points there I think you brought up that are really key. And when we do talk about investments, I think that it shouldn't really be viewed as too different from any other way that we spend our money when we're buying products or goods or services. We all have a preference for where we get those products, whether it's because they, the origin of the company, because that those companies do certain their behavior behind what they actually do. And that might be everything from, where we shop for food to the types of cars that we buy to where we get our clothes, whether it's local or whatnot. But we do have that ability, again, like you said, to do it through our investments. And I think even more so that there is a proactive approach that helps provide greater returns just beyond the financial return side of things. So whether it's just simply that, we're looking at companies and we recognize there are no perfect companies out there, but we feel it's a good investment. We feel that we can make change. That's the approach that we like to take. And again, having that discussion in a boardroom with senior management, it creates results. And we've been able to prove that time and time again. So, again, great way to look at it from that point of view that your dollars are creating that financial future for you. They're also creating a world, ideally, that we feel that is better for everyone in a lot of aspects.
Rod, can you see some of the questions that the audience has asked?
Yeah, I see one here. So I've read RIs exploding in Canada as the coronavirus and anti-racism movement highlighted longstanding social inequalities. You're absolutely right. Last summer was a great example of not only the combination of both of those, and I'd mentioned there where we did see some companies who kind of really stepped up during coronavirus period and kind of, embraced their employees, kind of maybe doing the right thing around that paid off for them long term, rather than some other companies which kind of said we're simply going to go the other way. Anti-racism, absolutely. I think that really brought kind of the diversity question in terms of hiring practices, pay practices. It again brings in human rights as a whole, which is very much a theme as we move forward.
And there is information about the activism part on the website, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can share that document with you if you'd like to see that, that it is where it is on our website. This is called our active ownership report. And I'm just going to do this and I'm going to do this. For those of you who are interested, Scott would be able to direct you to it. But again, this is something called, this is available for everybody and it's available on a quarterly basis. And it just basically gives you an account of the last 90 days of what our team has done. And there's a number of different themes, I think, that are covered here. Like we said, talking about things like, right up the top there, board diversity with the number of different companies we looked at, equitable compensation, of course, climate change oversight, so these are all topics, again, top of mind. These are headline issues, but very much intertwined with the companies that we invest in and the companies that are invested in our funds.
Perfect. And for those that are interested, there is a link on the First Credit Union website for some additional information that way. But it's nice to know that it's not once that some activity happened. It's several companies are being engaged on an ongoing basis, and it's changing as to what issues being discussed with the different companies.
Yep. I've just put the link up there as well.
Perfect.
Yeah. Sorry, and then the second question there, invested in REITs. If there is an opportunity there, absolutely. We don't exclude REITs necessarily. We would take a look at REITs through that ESG lens, of course. But yeah, it would be part of our financial universe that we'd be looking at.
So when it comes to investing, yes, there are some investments that are being excluded. We briefly touched upon those as nuclear power, tobacco, armaments, that type of thing. But when it comes to other companies, it is still a diversified group that is being chosen for the portfolio, correct?
Absolutely. It's a huge universe. There's thousands and thousands of companies out there. So we're not limiting ourselves by, just simply excluding things like tobacco companies or what it may be. Where one company is taken away, there's another company that pops up that is a better investment option from a financial point of view, as well as from that ESG point of view as well.
Okay. One of the panelists asked a more pointed question. What's the difference between responsible investing and impact investing? So how would you answer that?
So the way we look at it is responsible investing is kind of the broader umbrella. And it kind of really then tapers down from there. So responsible investing could be, it's the general topic of looking at a company outside or away from the balance sheet specifically. And that could be, again, through the ESG lens is one kind of aspect of responsible investing. Then employing screens, again, to avoid certain areas. Impact investing is where you actually have measured output from the types of companies you're investing in. So those metrics that come from, as a result, apart from just financial returns. So the one slide I shared with you, which came from the Environmental Leaders Fund, which talked about how we were able to produce certain units of renewable energy to avoid carbon emissions. We're able to treat or process water in order to provide that. So those are kind of some of the metrics that we produce or come from our portfolio managers more correctly, which help understand that your investment is doing more than just providing that financial return. Another area that's growing within that as well, people getting more accustomed to that word green bond. So green bonds, again, are something that obviously on the fixed income side, but they are kind of dollars that are earmarked for investment, specifically for that would have, in the term green bond, an positive environmental impact. The one example that we have within one of our funds is Tesla bonds. We actually had Tesla bonds because Tesla went to market a couple of years ago when they were building their solar panel factory in the southern United States. So they issued some bonds in order to raise capital to build that actual factory. So we have some of those bonds because, again, the ultimate output from that would be renewable energy production.
Yeah, feel free, anybody, if you had some more questions that you think that Rod might be able to shed some light on, feel free to ask.
If we don't have questions here, Scott, I'm always open. If people want to, funnel them through you or through you, and you can pass them on to me, and I can always either get answers from my team to help address whatever their concerns are or their questions are.
Perfect, yeah. And definitely, we introduced the team here in our wealth management department. So if anybody's got questions, we encourage you to either sit down with us, give us a phone call, set up another Zoom session like this. But know that there are options out there and that you can explore the ones that work best for you, right? So more information and contact information can be found from First Credit Union website. So www.firstcu.ca. And yeah, we thank you for sharing your evening here with us. And I hope that you have learned something here. And definitely thank you, Rod, for sharing the story of ESG with us tonight.
Thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Thanks. Take care.